Morning, eighth grade. I'm trying a new program right now. So let's see. There we go. Okay, so the Cold War and the space race. Oops, I guess I gotta move it back up. Go back in. Let's go back. Okay, so the space race occurred during the Cold War from the 1950s to the 1970s. It involved both the US and the Soviet Union trying to outdo each other with space exploration uh, in terms of technology advancements and achievements. And they spent millions of dollars developing rockets, satellites, astronauts, launching space missions, and so on. Both sides would use their inventions and achievements as public events with media coverage and propaganda. The space race unfolded as a series of key events and achievements between the two superpowers. The cover of Time magazine with a US astronaut and a Soviet cosmonaut racing to the moon. On October 4th, 1957, the Soviet Union launched the first satellite into space called Sputnik 1. That's what it looked like. The surprise of its success is considered to have sparked the space race. And again, it provided scientists with valuable information about the density of the upper atmosphere and could be deduced from its drag on the orbit. And the propagation of its radio signals gave information about the ionosphere, which is one of the layers of the atmosphere. And its radio signal continued 22 days until the battery ran out. On November 3rd, 1957, the Soviets launched Sputnik 2. That was their second spacecraft launched into Earth's orbit, and it carried the first living animal, and it was a dog named Lakia. Then this is the size of Sputnik 2. That's what it looks like. Then it was engineering and biological data is where it was transmitted to Earth for a 15-minute period during each orbit. And the photometers were aboard for measuring solar radiation and cosmic rays. January 31st, 1958, the first American satellite called Explorer 1 was launched into orbit. And there's some specifics about it, and it was the first spacecraft to detect the Van Allen radiation belt. And it returned data until its batteries were exhausted 4 months later. March 5th, 1958, the US failed to launch its second satellite, Explorer 2. One of its rockets did not ignite. Then on March 17th, 1958, the US launched the Vanguard 1 satellite into space. It would be the fourth satellite launched, but the first one to be solar powered. It was designed to test the launch capabilities of a three-stage launch vehicle as part of Project Vanguard, and the effects of the environment on satellite and its system in Earth's orbit. October 1st, 1958, the US creates the NASA. April 12th, 1961, Yuri Gagarin orbits the Earth once and becomes the first man in space. May 5th, 1961, the first American is sent into space, and that was Alan Shepard, and he was on 15-minute, 28-second suborbital flight on Freedom 7. Then February 20th, 1962, the first American to orbit the Earth. That was John Glenn. And he circles the Earth 3 times in 4 hours and 56 minutes aboard Friendship 7 on the Mercury Atlas 6 mission. September 2nd, 1962, President John F. Kennedy challenges the nation to go to the moon before the end of the decade. And this is an excerpt of one of his speeches about space travel. He was really into that, and then we had the Cuban Missile Crisis, which kind of deterred a little bit from that, but he was very much supportive of the space program. June 16, 1963, the first woman in space, the Soviets launched Valentina Tereshkova. She was in space 3 days alone. March 18, 1965, cosmonaut Alexei Leonov takes his first spacewalk outside Voskhod 2. June 3rd, 1965, during the Gemini 4 mission, Ed White becomes the first American to conduct a spacewalk. Then on July 20th, 1969, we had a space flight, Apollo 11, that landed the first humans on the moon. And Neil Armstrong became the first to step on the lunar surface on July 20th. Armstrong spent about 2.5 hours outside the spacecraft. And this was seen as a symbolic end of the space race, as the U.S. had won the race to the moon. And by the mid-1970s, the U.S. And the Soviet Union would start an era of cooperation rather than competition. The International Space Station is just that. It's international. There's Soviet astronauts, U.S. astronauts, Japanese, Italians, and so on. So it is very much international.